I have a secret, and I'm terrible at keeping secrets. So here it is. The market, as tough as it looks right now, might be shaping up to be the best real estate market for investors in many years. Now, you're going to have to do a little bit of actual work, and you may have to negotiate. You may have to generate leads. You may have to even create value and waiting for the market to do it for you. But if you'll stick with me for the next few minutes, I think you'll see exactly what I mean. Today on Flip America. Hello, everyone. Over the past few years, I've heard a lot of investors tell me they can't find deals. And for a while, I believed them. But every decent property receives 15 offers by the end of the day, and the hedge funds seem like they're buying entire neighborhoods. And when interest rates distorted nearly every corner of the housing market, it's fair to wonder whether the game had changed forever. But lately, I've noticed something. It's nothing new. In fact, it's the way real estate investing has worked for decades. It's just been so long since these conditions existed that some younger investors may never experienced it. What I'm talking about is a balanced market. The people finding deals today aren't necessarily smarter than they were 5 years ago. The market is simply beginning to reward the skills that made investors successful before the craziness started. Negotiation, lead generation, construction knowledge, vision, patience. The market is not easy right now. I understand that, but it's beginning to look like actual investing again. What I mean by that is finding a way to add value to a property. I'll give you the details in just a moment, but first I want to just give a quick shout out to the sponsors for today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at PropStream, RE Simply, and REI Kit. If you're serious about finding opportunities instead of waiting for opportunities to find you, these tools are worth investigating. I'll say more about a little later on. All right, let's jump into listener questions. First question today is from Jason in Dayton, Ohio. He says, Roger, are there actually any deals left? Jason, that's one of the most common questions I'm hearing these days. And the answer is yes, there are deals, but there are fewer gifts. For a while, the market was doing a lot of the work. You could just about buy anything, and rising prices would cover your mistakes. Money covered mistakes, and buyer frenzy covered mistakes. A lot of people confuse a strong market with investing skill. Today, the market is asking investors to do their jobs again, which is actually kind of the theme of the show today. Today's market is making you work for it, but I like the positive angle. The market is giving you your actual job back. For years, investors were competing against inventory, institutional buyers, low interest rates, and sellers who believed their homes were worth whatever the highest Zillow estimate happened to be that morning. Now, inventory is slowly but surely increasing. Buyers are becoming more selective. Sellers are becoming more realistic. I know that the media is trying to tell you, whoa, this is like a dreadful thing, but I'm telling you, this is not a problem. For real estate investors, this is an opportunity. A strong market rewards ownership. A normal market rewards skill. If you spend any time how to negotiate problem, manage construction, and create value, your skill set is about to be relevant again. All right, next question is from Melissa in Arizona. She says, how are investors finding deals right now? And I'm glad you asked this, Melissa, because it leads directly into one of the biggest mistakes I see investors making. They're focusing on deals instead of leads, trying to make everything work out rather than just getting more leads in the pipeline. Not long ago, I took a consulting call from a gentleman who seemed uncomfortable from the moment we started talking. He was nervous. His answers were short and abrupt. So I took a little bit more control of the conversation. And one of the questions I often ask people is, hey, do you consider yourself to be more task-oriented or people-oriented? He said, task-oriented, 110%. I basically hate people. That's what it took me by surprise. So I asked him, well, do you have over $100,000 to invest? No. I said, look, man, I just got to be real with you. If you hate people and you don't have a lot of money, this business is probably not for you. If you have a lot of money to invest, that can overcome your unwillingness to talk to people. But if you don't have a lot of money, you're just going to have to talk to people. This is a people business. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. He actually thanked me for the insight, hung up, never heard from him again. I hope that he found joy doing something in life where he didn't really have to interact with people, or maybe address whatever pain was causing that. But that's off the subject. Real estate investing is fundamentally a people business. When investors tell me they can't find deals and agents tell me they can't find listings, they're usually describing the same problem. They're looking at outcomes instead of input. Everyone wants more deals. Everyone wants more listings. Everyone wants more contracts. The real question is, how many opportunities are entering your pipeline every week? That's where success begins. All right. Time now to do the news. Story number one, inventory is rising. The number of homes available for sale has been steadily increasing across much of the country. We're nowhere near pre-2020 levels, but buyers have had more choices than in years. What does that mean? It means that sellers are no longer automatically going to get whatever they're asking for. It means that buyers can negotiate again. And it means that investors have a chance to do something that used to be normal. Analyze a deal before making an offer, because you don't have to have something there in 10 minutes or that. That's not bad news. That's an opportunity. Story number two, builders are offering incentives again. Now, we've mentioned this before, but I want to stress home builders are increasingly using incentives, rate buy downs, upgrades, and price reductions to move inventory. A few years ago, builders could put their homes on the market and wait, 15 minutes and they'd have an offer. Today, people are negotiating, and the builders are. When builders start negotiating, the rest of the market usually follows. That's a sign that we're moving away from the frenzy and back toward a market where skill matters. But here's another opportunity. If you're interested in owning rental properties and a builder's got some inventory and they're working out some deals in an area where you want to be, buy and long-term hold might be the play. All right, story number three, and this is actually a culmination of many stories. The mortgage rates still seem high, but guess what? People are moving away. A lot of headlines are focusing on mortgage rates, and the rates certainly matter if you're an end buyer, but here's something investors ought to remember. People don't move because rates are low. People move because life happens. They get married, they get divorced, they retire, they inherit property, they relocate for work, children, or they become empty nesters. The lock-in effect is real, but eventually overwhelms interest rates. That's why transaction volume is slowly returning, even though rates remain elevated. And I just want to remind you of something that I've said many times before. The historic average for mortgage rates since there has been a mortgage business is around 7 or 8%. So interest rates for mortgages is not ridiculous, and it's not even historically high. It's okay. Figure out a way to work with the rate that's there. Now take these all together, and the stories and the questions that are coming from you tell me just one thing. The market isn't getting easier. The market is getting more normal, which is good news for investors. For several years, ownership alone has created wealth, and now we're returning to a market where success comes from finding opportunities, solving problems, negotiating terms, controlling costs, and creating value. In other words, investors are getting their jobs back. Hey, I want a free daily investing tip. You can cover it in just a couple or 3 minutes. Real estate investing quick tips is a daily, maybe 2-minute tip on some aspect of real estate investing. I get a kick out of writing these things, and we deliver them daily, and you can subscribe for free. Now, on Saturdays, we take a little bit more time about some construction topic, and Sundays, we get a little reflective and do something on mindset and attitude, life or business. But you can subscribe for free. Just go to flippingamerica.net/quick tips, or you can scan the QR code if you're watching this on the screen, and you can subscribe, and tomorrow you'll get the tip. Now, speaking of quick tips, one of my lessons from this week's quick tips came from rule number 6 of my 7 rules for real estate investing. If you subscribe now, you'll get rule number 7 on Monday. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but I want to do more shameless plug, okay? This takes you as no surprise probably, but I'm interested in a lot of things besides real estate. One of them is history. And we capture some of this in our newsletter called Rewind. It's a daily look back at the 10 most significant developments in world history on that date. You can subscribe by scanning the QR code or flippingamerica.net/rewind. For everyone watching, the QR code is right there on screen. All right, the other one is Wonder. It's a daily consideration of things from nature that make us say, wow. Both of these newsletters are free. You can click their name and subscribe, or join us in our quest to understand the other one is Wonder, a daily consideration of things from nature that make us say, wow. You could click the the other newsletter is Wonder, a daily consideration of things that make us say, wow. Just scan the QR code that's on screen or go to flippingamerica.net/wonder. You can subscribe, and it's free, and it's every day. All right. Rule number 6 of the 7 rules for real estate investing. Rule number 6 is picture your life in the future. The rule is simple. You might be wondering why this one isn't rule number 1. After all, shouldn't we begin with the end in mind? Maybe, but I've always thought a little bit of a hierarchy of needs involved in here. When you first start getting involved in real estate investing, you really just need to get going with the investing. All right. You need to learn how to feed yourself, your family. You need income. You need stability. You need deal flow, and you need to get the ship off the dock before you really start plotting your course across the ocean. Eventually, though, you're going to have to decide where you're headed. A few years ago, Diana and I decided to take my own advice. Flipping America was rolling along okay. The podcast was doing great. We had experienced some successes, some setbacks, some momentum, and some frustrations. And like most entrepreneurial ventures, there wasn't a straight line. So we stepped away. Not forever, just long enough. We spent a few months traveling and talking about the life we were building, and not the next project, not the next quarter, not the next deal, the next decade. What did we want our days to look like? Where did we want to live? And boy, that was an interesting discussion. How did we want to spend our time? What kind of work energized us? What kind of work drains us? And perhaps most importantly, what were we building that still might matter 10 years from now or 50 years from now? That process changed a lot of things in our lives. It led directly to the creation of Grapevine Publishers, which is publishing the 3 newsletters that I just mentioned, Quick, Rewind, and Wonder. It led to the restart eventually of this podcast. In many ways, the things we're doing today grew out of conversations we had while sitting on beaches and walking through unfamiliar towns and asking questions about the future. I bring this up because investors often focus exclusively on the next transaction. That's understandable. The next transaction pays the bills, but eventually you need to think beyond the next transaction. And that's why this is rule number 6, not rule number 1. Sometime or another, you have to get to this. If your goal is rental property, where do you want those rentals to be located? If your dream is to live near your grandchildren someday, does your current investment strategy support that vision? If your goal is financial freedom, what does that actually mean? Freedom to do what? If your goal is building a business, how large do you want the business to come? Do you want employees, partners, offices? Are you building something intentionally small and flexible? Those answers matter because they influence the decisions you're about to make. One of the mistakes I see investors making, and I have made, is chasing opportunities that don't actually fit the life you're trying to create. A deal can be profitable and still be wrong for you. A business model can work and still be a poor fit. A market can be hot, still not align with your long-term goals. The clearer your vision of the future becomes, the easier it is to say yes to the right opportunities and no to the wrong ones. And that's a skill every bit as valuable as knowing how to estimate repairs or calculate after repair value. Because eventually, success stops being about what you can do and starts becoming about what you choose to do. And that brings me to another lesson from this week. If the market is really returning to normal, then investors need to remember something we've nearly forgotten over the last few years. Deals don't come from the market. Deals come from people. Let's talk for just a few minutes about lead generation, because you probably don't have a deal problem. You probably have a lead problem. So ask yourself this question. How many opportunities have entered your pipeline this week? Not this month, this week. Look, I know it sounds like I'm being ridiculous or overstating this, but when I was actually actively pursuing deals, it was not uncommon for me to get 15,000 opportunities in my inbox in a week. I had spreadsheets of properties and lists and tapes and all manner of things. I was on the email list for dozens, maybe hundreds of wholesalers. And we were looking at so many things. We really rarely got to everything. In fact, I don't think we ever did. But we looked at hundreds of deals every week to make dozens of offers to get a few accepted. All right. That pipeline is something that we spend a lot of time doing. And actually, I wrote a little ebook about it. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Fantastic Deals and Where to Find Them. I didn't even mention that today, but I just thought, I wrote the book on how to do this. And it's, like 4.9 stars out of 5 on Amazon. I think you can get it for maybe $9.99 for the paperback. I don't even know what the Kindle version is. A couple of dollars. All right. If you want more deals, don't focus on the deal. Focus on inputs. Focus on what's in the pipeline. All right. How do you get the things in the pipeline? Back in 2002, when we got started in Atlanta, Georgia's foreclosure process moved incredibly fast. It still does. Once the foreclosure was publicly announced, there are only about 30 days before the property was auctioned on the courthouse steps. We became obsessed with finding ways to contact homeowners during that short window. We sent letters and postcards. We made calls. All right, that's the AC guy. Back in 2002, when we got started in Atlanta, Georgia's foreclosure process moved incredibly fast. Once the foreclosure was publicly announced, there were only about 30 days before the property was auctioned on the courthouse steps. We became obsessed with finding ways to contact homeowners during that short window. We sent letters, we made calls, we knocked on doors, we offered solutions, and almost no one said yes. Occasionally, we would get one or sometimes two before the auction, but most of the time, we just end up buying the properties for cash at the foreclosure sale. For nearly a year, that's how we operated. And then one day it occurred to me that I had absolutely nothing to lose by asking again, so we changed the process. 1 week after our initial contact, we followed up. That was it. No sophisticated CRM, no artificial intelligence, no automation, just a phone call, maybe another postcard, another conversation, and almost immediately our results changed. After getting one yes every few months, we started getting one every month. The leads hadn't changed. The market hadn't changed. The follow-up changed. That's when I realized most investors don't really have a lead problem nearly as often as they have a follow-up problem. Well, let's talk about actual lead generation. It can be direct mail. It can be driving dollars. It could be absentee owner outreach. It can be probate leads. It can be foreclosure leads. The specific source matters less than your consistency. If you're looking for tools that can help, I've got some that I have used and I can recommend. I've used PropStream for years. It's one of the best platforms available for identifying properties and building targeted lead lists. And of course, you can learn more about it and jump onto a free trial at flippingamerica.net/PropStream. I've also become friends with guys over at RE Simply. If you're managing leads and keeping follow-up, this has a killer CRM functionality with workflow management, marketing tool, everything that you need to run your business is with RE Simply, and it's RESIMPLI, flippingamerica.net/RE Simply. And one of my good buddies in the business is over at REI Kit. And if you're serious about building highly targeted lists and direct mail campaigns, REI Kit is another excellent option. And if you go to flippingamerica.net/REI Kit, click the thing. Not only all of these will give you a free trial, but REI is also going to give you a discount for just being our friend. Okay. And when you click our link, that's all in there. It doesn't cost you any more. In fact, it costs you less if you use our link to go to REI Kit. Now, I'm not suggesting you need all of these tools. I am suggesting that you need a system. Tools make your life easier. The same principle applies to agents, and we've got some resources for agents as well. Here's a little stat that may surprise you. We have over 50,000 agents that subscribe to our Quick Tips newsletter. So we're in touch with quite a few. And agents are concerned about inventory shortages, and I've noticed that a lot of agents just don't make outbound calls. They're kind of waiting for the listings to come to them, sort of like investors do. A listing shortage comes prospecting shortage, and agents who consistently win the listings almost always have a process for creating conversations. Expired listings, FSBOs, circle prospecting, past clients, referral requests. The specific strategy doesn't matter as much as the consistency of execution. The market is never going to reward you for wishing. It's going to reward you for working. The investors and agents who thrive over the next few years will not necessarily be the smartest people in the room, but they will be the ones who consistently place new opportunities into their pipeline and consistently follow up, because deals are not just found. Deals are often created.
I try to keep them from downstairs that we did as soon as they heard people that would be barking. I tried.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can't help it.
Yeah. We haven't finished up in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
How long does he need down there?
I don't know.
Okay, before we go, we're going to have a little fun. I've with a new feature on the show. We're going to call it Would Have Been Viral. These are true stories from my years in real estate that are ridiculous. If someone had captured them on video, they probably would have ended up all over the internet. This week's story comes from a rental house I owned in Hampton, Georgia. Nothing fancy, just a nice little rental house. The kitchen had those, preformed butch block laminate countertops you can buy at Home Depot. In fact, I know exactly that's where they come from because that's where we bought them. Now, the pre-made countertops were a couple of inches too long in either direction, but I thought, that's close enough for jazz or low-end rental properties. So we had a tenant move in. He wanted to use his own refrigerator instead of the one that came with the house. No problem. We hauled the refrigerator away and let him install his. Everything seemed fine. 2 years later, the tenant moved out. As we were getting the house ready for the next renter, we discovered something interesting. His refrigerator didn't actually ever fit in the space because of the counter overhang. Now, most people faced with that problem would probably ask the landlord for help. Not this guy. Apparently, he decided he could handle it himself. And the most reasonable solution was to modify the countertop. And modify, I mean cut off about an inch. And by cut, I mean with a chainsaw in the kitchen, him on a laminate countertop. Now, I wasn't there when this happened, but I spent years trying to imagine the decision-making process that led to it. At no point did he stop and think maybe there's a better tool. Nope. He took an inventory of what he had. He saw a chainsaw and he thought, problem solved, hold my beer. I learned many things from owning rental properties, but one of the most important is this. When someone tells you they're handy, it's asking, do they mean contractor handy or chainsaw handy? And although I hated the result, I really wish he would have videoed the cutting action itself. Probably would have gone viral. All right, that's it for today. I'll leave you with a quote to think about. One of the great lies of motivational speakers is you have greatness inside of you. Not everyone has greatness or the seeds of greatness in themselves, but everyone can choose goodness. And if you do that often enough, that could be pretty great. See you next time. Okay, I'll make a show out of that.